So this is not going to be a normal, rational wrestling talk edition. This is simply going to be a tribute of Windham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt. And I want to take this opportunity to really, remember Bray Wyatt. And not just as a performer, but as a human being. Because this man was loved by many. It seems to me that, that his recent death has taught me that he has touched so many people. He's touched so many lives. And it's very tragic that Bray had to leave us so soon at such a young age. I mean, he was 36. He didn't get to even live his entire life as a man, as a human being. He didn't get to have the full experience or live his full experience. There is probably so much more for Bray Wyatt to do, to accomplish. Not just as a performer, but as a father, a husband, etc. And when I first heard about his passing, I was just lost for words. Like, I really had nothing to say in that moment when I saw Triple H's tweet. A lot of people said that, someone could have hacked Triple H's Twitter and, all this stuff. They didn't think it was true at first or real. I just, it's taken time for me to process. And a lot of wrestling fans are grieving. But there is no one that is grieving more. And as much as, no matter how passionate the wrestling fans are, no matter how passionate you are as a Bray Wyatt supporter, as a fan, I can guarantee you there is nobody more grieving more than the people that knew him, from his best friends in the business, from his brother, his father, his wife, and his children. There's no one that's grieving more than those people. I feel for his children. I feel for JoJo. Because now they have to continue life without their father. JoJo has to continue her life without her husband. Bo has to continue his life without his brother. His father has to continue his life without his son. You see, this hit hard. It hit hard because, and I don't want to just make this about Bray Wyatt. We lost Terry Funk. That was another legend in the business. Terry Funk. Obviously, I didn't grow up watching Terry Funk, but it's never a good thing when you lose somebody, right? It's never good to see another wrestler hit the bucket. It's never a good thing. And if you're someone that grew up on Terry Funk, you definitely grieved a lot. You felt that pain, and you were probably really sad to see him go. I will say this, though. Terry Funk, he left this earth at 79 years old. You know, for a wrestler, that's a long time to live. It really is. I'm pretty sure that Terry Funk had an amazing life. He got to live out his dream. He was fulfilled. He experienced everything that there was to experience in his life. And the only Terry Funk match that I saw was, I believe it was ECW One Night Stand 2006, where he teamed up with Mick Foley to take on Edge, and I believe, no, I'm sorry. I got to correct myself. It was Terry Funk and I want to say Tommy Dreamer. I think it was Tommy Dreamer versus Edge and Mick Foley in that tag team hardcore match. Dude, let me tell you, when I saw that match, I watched it. That was hardcore. Like, there was a lot of hardcore stuff going on in that match. I mean, from the barbed wire, I mean, just a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of crazy antics in that match. I mean, Mick Foley, Terry Funk, they took a beating. They really and Terry Funk especially, he took one hell of a beating and a lot of punishment in that match. I remember seeing his face bleeding and stuff. Just him being trapped in that barbed wire, man. Oh my God. That was brutal. Absolutely brutal. So that was probably my only memory, um, of Terry Funk in the ring. I may have seen him and Mick Foley face the New Age Outlaws at that WrestleMania years ago. I think WrestleMania 15. Um, but other than that, that's really all I've seen of Terry Funk. And like I said, I didn't grow up watching Terry Funk. So I didn't have that strong of I guess, connection or fandom for Terry Funk as I do for Bray Wyatt. You know, well, that's probably the only match I've seen of Terry Funk. I mean, that was a crazy match, and I really enjoyed it too. You know, but also rest in peace to Terry Funk. My condolences go out to his family, of course. You know, we lost him. We lost Bray. We lost Bob Barker. Bob Parker. I want, yeah, Bob Parker. Um, all in the same week. Bob Parker was on one Raw episode, where he was in that segment with Chris Jericho, and during that whole um, Raw guest GM era where they had all these like guest appearances from celebrities that would come on Raw and be the general manager for one night, and Bob Parker was on that one Raw. So it's been a tough week for wrestling. That's for sure. An emotional week. And as a wrestling fan, you grow up and you watch certain wrestlers that have quite an impact on you, right? You may not know it in the moment when you're watching them. You may not appreciate, their talent, their creativity, and just their performance, right? How great they are. It's not until they leave the business or even after they pass away that you you take a moment to really appreciate and realize how great they were and how much they left an impact on your life, or just your fandom of wrestling, right? Because as fans, wrestlers that wrestlers can leave an impact on us, in a certain way. And it hurts when, they're gone, because, it's like you grew up watching them. You grew up watching their development from start to finish. You know, and a lot of wrestling fans of this generation are really mourning the loss of Bray Wyatt because they grew up watching him. This hit home, this hit hard for a lot of reasons. Because, we just saw Bray Wyatt at the Royal Rumble. He was about to come back. He was this close to coming back. And it's insane that, he's gone. He suffered a heart attack. And I believe he had COVID too. And on top of having COVID and then that heart attack, it really, at that point it was the end, And for a while they were saying that he had a unknown illness. The illness is that, the illness, they didn't want to disclose or let people know what the illness was about because they wanted to protect Bray's privacy, in which they did. But I'm hearing it was COVID, that he had a heart attack too. And but it's just surreal that we just seen him. He was going to come back. Who knew what was going to be the plan, what he was going to do when he came back? How are they going to wrap up his story? How were they going to, first and foremost, how were they going to tell the story with him and Uncle Howdy? Right? I was interested to see what story they were going to tell with Bray and Uncle Howdy. But this death is very impactful for wrestling fans that grew up watching Bray. The next generation of wrestling fans is not going to be able to experience Bray, right? Or if you're just now watching wrestling, you didn't get to see much of Bray. It's the same thing with like an Owen Hart. If you didn't grow up watching Owen Hart, seeing all of Owen Hart from in the 90s, right? If you didn't grow up watching wrestling in the 90s, you didn't get to see all of Owen Hart, then obviously his death didn't really impact you as much as it did for the wrestling fans that did grow up on him, right? You grew up on Owen Hart. You were very saddened by the loss of Owen Hart, and you felt that. Like, you felt everybody else's pain. You were definitely mourning. You had tears in your eyes because that was probably your favorite wrestler growing up. You grew up on Owen Hart. You saw all of Owen Hart. You saw all of his great matches, all his great moments. Same thing with Roddy Piper, Dusty Rhodes. It's, as a wrestling fan, it's going to hit you hard when you grew up on him. It's not going to hit the same for the wrestling fans that did not get to grow up on those wrestlers from the past, because they simply weren't born, or they just they weren't fans of wrestling at that time period. So knowing about their death, it won't impact them as much. But for a lot of fans today, I'm telling you, this is hitting hard. This is definitely a huge loss. And a lot of fans are emotional and saddened because you saw Bray Wyatt. And for me, it hits hard. It definitely has impacted me as a fan, because I saw Bray Wyatt when he was first Husky Harris. That's right. The NXT competition show from 2010. I saw Husky Harris. That was my first glance of Bray Wyatt. Husky Harris. I was there from the very beginning. From Husky Harris to the Wyatt family. I saw the live debut of the Wyatt family. I remember like it was yesterday when they first debuted. When Bray said, he whispered, "We're here." And then blew the candle. And then the entire arena erupted. They were, it was such a memorable debut. And the fans were ready for it. Like when you first saw Bray debut along with the Wyatt family, you knew you were about to see something special. You knew that this was a special performer like no other. Almost as identical to Undertaker. And I'm an Undertaker fan. For many years, Bray Wyatt has been compared to the Undertaker in a lot of ways. I see some of the comparisons, but not all the way. I couldn't help but feel like Bray Wyatt was like almost the second coming of mankind to a certain degree. I could not all the way accept him as the second coming of Undertaker, because in my opinion, I don't really like to compare wrestlers from the previous generation to the current generation. Like, in my opinion, there's only one Undertaker. Just like there's only one Bray Wyatt. No one else can be another Bray Wyatt. You know what I mean? There's only one Bray. That's it. I don't think we're going to get anybody more creative, anybody more unique than a Bray Wyatt that comes in the wrestling business and like comes in with the type of creativity that Bray had, right? And his creative mind was multifaceted. He had so many ideas that he wanted to bring to life. And I bet you he had a lot more ideas that he wanted to, put out on TV, but didn't get a chance to do so. And he was just a special character, you know. Seeing all those vignettes of the Wyatt family, because I was there for that too. And I was just like, man, there's something different about Bray. Like, there's like this uniqueness about him that we didn't get to see from other wrestlers. And let me tell you something, man. Around the, 2012, 2013 era wrestling, when it came to the WWE, around that time period, there wasn't a lot of interesting characters. There was a lot of bland wrestlers on that roster that were just mediocre. That was just there, you know. You didn't have a lot of like A1 talent. Like, you had talented guys, but it's like it wasn't enough to capture your attention. You know what I'm saying? Like, not the same way that Bray captured your attention. You know? There was not a lot of wrestlers that made you care. Bray was one of the few characters during the times where Raw and SmackDown completely sucked, right? And he was able to capture your attention. He was able to reel you in what he was doing, right? As a performer, he made you care. Whether you liked the show or not, whether you thought the show sucked or not, Bray Wyatt had a way of making you care. Because I'm not saying all of his promos were memorable, but I remember all of his promos were consistent and they were unique. And you can tell that he was writing those promos word for word, that fit his character, this like horror movie villain type of character, right? Or like this cult like leader, And that's kind of what he was. The eater of worlds, He could just say anything, and the way he delivers it, it makes you want to hear more, So he had no choice but to stand out amongst the rest, because everybody else just felt like they were just reading off a script. No excitement, no energy, no enthusiasm, nothing to make you care. But Bray was the opposite. And sure, Bray Wyatt, the character, had some dull moments. He had moments where it wasn't looking good for him, right? There have been times, he lost feuds that he should have never lost. John Cena, 2014. I still believe to this day that Bray should have beaten John Cena clean. And I think it should have happened at WrestleMania 30. I'm just saying. But I understood that he was a villain and he was playing his role. And there were times where creative failed him, right? But he just had a way of kind of turning chicken shit into chicken salad, making things work, and finding new ways to reinvent himself, right? He had feuds that kind of flopped. but he also had feuds that were memorable. My favorite matches of Bray was him versus Daniel Bryan, Royal Rumble 2014. That was perhaps his best singles match ever. The story behind it was captivating. It was short-lived, but it was captivating. That was pretty much the catalyst for Daniel Bryan's, entire Yes movement, his rise to the main event scene. And I'll never forget that one Raw episode, the steel cage match, the main event, the Usos versus Bray and Daniel Bryan, back when Daniel Bryan was part of the Wyatt family for a couple of weeks. But the way they did it was so good, because the fans were so disappointed and they were so heartbroken that their hero at that time, Daniel Bryan, joined the Wyatt family. It kind of told the story that if you can't beat them, join them. Right? That's the story that was told with that. It felt like Daniel Bryan had no choice but to join up with Bray in the Wyatt family because he was outnumbered. And that only added more fuel to your support for Daniel Bryan. It gave you more of a reason to want to cheer for Daniel Bryan, and cheer louder. And Bray, we can say that he was the reason or the straw that broke the camel's back for that Daniel Bryan push, right? To get him into that position to where the fans wanted him to be all along. And it was incredible. When he countered that Sister Abigail, the fans went crazy. They lost their mind. It was such a captivating moment. Like, as a wrestling fan, you had to watch it or be there in person to really understand how impactful that moment was, how special that was, because I watched it live. Then we had the Fiend character. Man, was I so excited for that character. And there was so much potential with that character, the whole Firefly Funhouse stuff, all those segments, man. They probably weren't your cup of tea, but you could at least appreciate the level of storytelling that was taking place, right? The innovation, and the time that the time that Bray took and creative took to really make those segments mean something, to make them entertaining. And they were entertaining, all having all the Muppets and stuff. And Bray just made the most out of it. Like you had a real taste of his creativity, and his creativity was put out on full display. All his ideas, like at first he was this fun-loving, Bray Wyatt that was just goofy, playing with Muppets and puppets and stuff, just acting like a goofball. And then he would transition into the Fiend, the evil, dark, sinister, horror film villain, right? In a mask. And it was just so good. It was just something so different. and unique. Like, once again, everything else on Raw and SmackDown, the landscape was just, it felt like everybody was the same, cookie cutter. With Bray, the Fiend stuff, just different. It stood out. And I feel like that's always been the theme of Bray Wyatt, is he always managed to stand out amongst the rest and not become stale and not become, not become boring. Like, he really knew how to reinvent himself when he needed to. And a lot of people, with the current storyline that was going on, the Uncle Howdy stuff, and Bray's multiple personalities. First of all, I just want to say, when he first came back, that return at Extreme Rules last year was very special. One of the most amazing returns of all time. I was looking forward to that return. As a Bray fan, one of my first pieces of merchandise was a Bray Wyatt T-shirt. Was also an Eric Rowan mask, right? The little sheep mask of Eric Rowan, right? Got that when I went to one of my first wrestling shows, like back in 2014. Yeah, that was one of my first piece of merchandise was Bray Wyatt. Because I was an actual fan. I was a fan of the Fiend stuff, and I knew when it came to this storyline with Bray and Uncle Howdy, it seemed like there was a lot of story to tell and a lot of ground to cover, and I feel like the story never fully got off the ground. Like, we were just scratching the surface, and people were kind of, giving up on it pretty quickly. They were taking their time with it. But my thing is, I was just waiting for something to pop off. And it felt like nothing really happened. Bray had that one match with LA Knight, the pitch black match at the Rumble. And I personally did not like the match because I feel like at that time watching it, it didn't really accomplish anything. But coming out of that match, it did a lot for LA Knight. As you can see, LA Knight came out of that feud better off. And that's all because of Bray. So Bray did him the favors. And what was I about to say? I'm about to lose my train of thought here. The storyline just never really took off. And a lot of people were just crapping all over it, not really giving it a chance. But I feel like they could have done a better job of picking up the pace with the storytelling and really establishing, the storyline. And it felt like it was put on hold, like nothing was happening. And a lot of fans became impatient with it. Personally, I wasn't too, I wasn't too hard on the storyline. I wasn't upset about it, but I wasn't really like overly excited about it. It was just kind of, let me just see where this goes, and let's see how they put the pieces together. Let's see how the final product looks before I judge anything. But they were just taking their sweet old time with the storyline, and it's unfortunate that it didn't really get off the ground. And it was definitely leading to somewhere. But the best thing about Bray's last run was his return promo. And I feel like personally we should have just went with that version of Bray. It felt more like Windham, not Bray. It felt like it was Windham talking and not Bray. You know what I mean? And Bray Wyatt, at the end of the day, was just an exceptional performer, very creative, so unique, and he's going to be missed, man. That's for sure. He's definitely going to be missed.